Hello, this is Paul with Reloading123. Hey, I appreciate you guys tuning back in. Man, we are getting right into the good stuff now. So you've got the tools, you got the press mounted onto your bench. Now this installment is going to show you basically how to get set up for reloading, and if we've got enough time, then we're going to dive right into setting up your resizer and decapping die. So let's get right at it. Okay, so today's project is to show you guys how to get set up for your first loading adventure. And my project today is going to be loading for a Marlin lever action 44 Magnum. This is a gun that I've got some experience with, but you know, even if I didn't have experience hand loading with it, I'm going to walk you through the exact same test. We are going to work up some loads, and this is going to be a little bit of a lengthy process because we're going to start from the bottom of the scale, if you will, in terms of powder charge, and work our way all the way up to just really where it really gets accurate. And I'm going to kind of show you what that, you know, performance kind of side looks like. Really it doesn't change much except the components. If you wanted to reload for, just for plinking loads, you would just use different components, but essentially the process is kind of the same. I would hope to think that you would, even for your plinking loads, you'd work up to try to find a plinking load that's accurate. So let's without further ado, we'll kind of dive in. So really what I've done to preface this is I've already cleaned the cases, and I've already cleaned my dies. I've already picked the components that I want to reload, and I'll try to explain a little bit to you why. Really, I'm reloading with these Hornady 180 grain hollow point bullets because I really want to try a lighter grain bullet in this lever action. They're notorious, this particular lever action is notorious for liking lighter bullets. I've never loaded anything this light, so I'm going to try 180 grain bullets. 44 Magnum really likes H110 powder for some of their hotter loads. Again, this is going to be a deer rifle, or at least potentially a deer rifle, and I want to give it a little bit of kick and make sure it's got plenty of stopping power at mid range. This is more a matter of convenience. I'm using this Winchester, what they call the WLP. It's a large pistol primer that works good for standard or Magnum loads. You'll find that the jury is completely out on whether you need to use this particular primer for standard or Magnum. But from what I've seen on all the tests, and my experience shows that they were great for both. They go boom every time you pull the trigger. I haven't had any problems. So of course we're going to use an RCBS carbide 3-die set. You've seen this set before in some of my setup videos. So we're going to set this thing up from scratch, and I'm going to show you what the load looks like in the load book, and I'll kind of show you what I'm chasing here. Hang on. As you guys know from my previous videos, I'm a fan of the Lyman 50th edition reloading handbook for beginners. This is a fantastic book, and I'm really thinking about doing some reloading book reviews. But just, this book has lots of great information, and as you can see here just by the table of contents in the small print, that this book is incredibly robust in terms of its content, not only in terms of its calibers that it covers, but as you'll see from here in the beginning here, this much information. If you can get a pretty good idea, that's probably almost a ½ an inch of this first part of this book is all about helping you guys make the best reloads that you can. So I'm a real big fan of this book. So really what I'm doing is I'm opening this book, I'm flipping to the 44 Magnum section, which I've already outlined, which happens to be right here. These pages, most good reloading manuals they're going to show you the caliber. They're going to write a quick blurb about what in their experience has worked well, what bullet and powder combinations and primer combinations. In terms of, you'll see kind of little icons here and little pictures of the actual bullets and when they're actually going into a lead bullet, that shows the lead bullets in it, you know, clearly, obviously a different color. So there's a lot here. If you recall, I'm using a 180 grain bullet, and this is the 180 grain section, and I'm going to use H110. Now on this book, which I'm going to try to zoom in here for you for a second, but what's important is that I'm going to work up loads starting at 29 grains all the way to 30. There's usually a fairly narrow window with this particular powder, just because the way it's made, and that it really has to be loaded on the hot side in order for it to perform well. So, and it's, you know, a fairly small window for our testing. So I'm going to start at 29 grains, work to 30, and I'm going to show you how that is set up. So in my notebook on the side here, I'm writing, you know, 44 Magnum, the date. I'm logging the actual bullet combination, you know, even the number. I would suggest that you mark the powder type. You may even consider marking the lot number. Also the primers. Primers also come in lot numbers as well. So use the primer, lot numbers here at the back. And that would give you a good set of data to start with on what you're going to reload. This book also tells you how long you're going to reload it, a number of things, but I'm going to come back to the book when we need to, because you will. So I'm going to really show you everything that I do, and I'm trying not to skip steps or make any assumptions. So I'm going to dive right into setting up the tools now that I've got my recipe, I've got my components at the ready. You know what you can see. Let me kind of back this bus up a little bit, because I kind of want to show you why this book, you know, is good. And I probably should cut the film, but I'm just going to let it run. Take a look at this section on powders. Now a lot of this is actually manufacturer information on powders, but just so you kind of see why, at what point in my, you know, time did I start here. Handgun powder that generally requires a heavy bullet and a heavy crimp to ensure uniform results. Applications are similar to 296. So now this is true. I typically use this powder for everything heavier. I want to use this powder for the lighter bullets because that's what I've got. And it doesn't say necessarily that it's great for lighter bullets. I do have some little gun powder that I've used for some bullets, but in this book I didn't see any. I'm using some tools to prop this up so you can see it better, but and get rid of the reflections. But I did not see anything really all that amazing when it came to little gun powder for the. You'll see here, there's maybe you can, maybe you can't, but there's no little gun powder listed here on the 180 grain, and none of these powders I actually have in inventory. So we're just going to use what I've got. They've got a load for it. We're going to go from there. What I want to show you here is really the whole setup process from the very beginning. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with our, you know, our press has been cleaned and lubed, and it's ready to go. We're going to insert the shell holder in the top of the ram like so. And I'm kind of doing this in an awkward direction, but hopefully you can see that well. It just snaps in. Many of them are the same. So with that ready to go, we're going to pop in our die in the top, and we're going to set this up to resize. Now typically what you'll do is you'll do this with the ram in the up position, the handle in the down position. You're going to run this all the way down at the bottom. I can't tell if that's hitting the shell holder or not. That you're going to run this all the way down until it makes good firm contact. Okay, what I really want you to see from this camera angle is kind of what we would call the camming over action that you should, the way you should set up your press. So what's happening is that now the die is, the ram is all the way up and the handle is all the way down. I've lowered the die to touch the shell holder, and now I want to set it to cam over. And what that does is essentially aligns the press and the die, and it pushes them together. So I want you to kind of focus right into here, because see right now you can see it kind of goes down on its own accord. What you're going to see is as I lower the die down and it puts a little pressure on the top of the shell holder, this is not going to go down on its own accord. Can you see it kind of stops short there now? And then I'm going to push this die down a little bit more. And I want you to hear a nice solid thunk, ka-thunk. Like, you see that? That's what we call camming over. So to me, you'll see where it stops right there. Then you have to push a little farther. And what that does is squares up the die. At this point, you can lock down the die. Okay, so now that I've squared up the die, I'm going to lower the ram down. And as you can see, my decapping assembly is still loose, and that's exactly the way I want it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out a piece of brass. This brass has already been cleaned in the tumbler. It's already been inspected one time, I want to add, but I want to show you something that can slip by and slip through the cracks if you're not careful. Can you see the piece of brass in there? So that's most likely a 9mm piece of brass inside a 44 case, and they get stuck in there when you're tumbling. And if you definitely do not want to load in that situation, you could get yourself in serious trouble. You want to be vigilant and observant. So I've tapped, as you saw, I tapped that piece of brass out of there, and now upon inspection I think we're good to go. I'm going to put the piece of brass into the shell holder. Now this doesn't need lubrication because I have the carbide set of dies. If I had the standard set of dies, then it would require lubrication. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to back my primer assembly out, and hopefully... Okay, so just to be clear, I've locked the die down, and now my depriming or decapping assembly is pretty high up. If you can see this, it is barely lowered whatsoever. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise the ram. And as you can see, the primer didn't pop all the way out. So what we need to do is we need to lower this decapping assembly a little more. And raise the ram one more time. Now it's still in there because I can't even pull it out, so it's being held at the bottom. So let's lower this decapping assembly a little further. When I say a little further, I'm kind of talking like, you know, half a turn at a time. I think you'll probably get a feel for what that feels like. And if you heard that, that was the primer popping out. So what we can do now is we can lock down the lock nut here at the top to set this priming decapping depth. And we are good to go. Now we have a piece of brass that's been resized and decapped. Now what I'm going to show you also is how to prime at the same time. So let's take a look at that.